Well, hello. Happy Boxing Day, everybody. I am Manila Chan. That over there is Ted Rawl. You are tuned in to the Ted Manila Information Show, TMI for short, where we're going to bring you way too much information. Anything from news, politics, lifestyle, culture, fad diets, what the kids are doing, what they're probably not doing, I think nowadays, more like it, the taboo
Studying,
stuff.
reading.
Stuff. Yeah, a lot of stuff they don't do, I feel like. Anything and everything goes. Because we believe you can never have too much information. So if you are looking for a straight-laced, button-down, like morning news program where they don't drop F-bombs and say bad words, this is not the show for you. We're not going to be offended. Go ahead and shut this thing off. But if that is your thing, welcome. You're in the right place. It is all the stuff that you already knew you wanted to hear about, like news and all that stuff, and then some other random stuff you didn't know you needed to know. And then, of course, we're going to laugh along the way. I'll probably cough along the way because I am slowly but surely healing from this pneumonia. We are live Monday through Friday, 10 a.m. Eastern. Be sure to like and follow this show. The Ted Manila Information Show starts now. We're going to talk about news, Boxing Day, and Festivus. Anything else? Did I leave anything out, Ted?
No, I think you've got that all covered.
No, that's it. All right, let's start the show.
I do the headlines.
Yeah, actually, before you go into headlines, should we explain Boxing Day to Americans?
Because I like it. We should, yes. Because it's on the calendar, and you see it on on the monthly calendar. And I don't know about you, but I think like most Americans, we find it a little bit mystifying, because I used to think it had something to do with fighting, like pugilism.
Did you really?
Yeah, I had no idea, and I was like, I don't know. I used to see Boxing Day, and you're growing up in Ohio.
I'm among the colonized peoples. Right, like northern Lao people are like the British colonized people, and then the lower half of Laos was French colonized. So we kind of
I always think of Laos as a French colony. Yeah, French Indochina.
There were it wasn't technically colonized by the British, but it was colonized by way of the church. So there were a lot of some Anglican. But anyway, that's where some of the people's last names get a little British sounding. But anyway, that's the whole thing is Western colonization of Laos. So I kind of always knew what Boxing Day was, but being in America, nobody else knew.
Nobody knows. I didn't know. I didn't know until pretty recently. All right, well, fill us in. Tell us what it's. Well, tell us what it is.
So I guess I think it's better off if I read technically how. For example, what the BBC describes it as. So it's obviously the day after Christmas. And I know right now in modern day British or how do we classify? They're not colonies anymore. Are they still colonies?
Members of the British Commonwealth?
The Commonwealth. That's it.
The Commonwealth of the English Empire. Yes.
So if you have the Queen on your money, that's probably the best way to describe.
Well, the King now, yeah.
Have they changed it to Charles?
Money? I'm sure they have. Yeah.
Actually, I don't know. Good question. I don't know. I mean, I still think of Commonwealth money as the Queen's.
Well, I'm sure a lot of it's still. That's a lot of what's still in circulation. But yeah. I mean, anyway. Obviously, anything new is going to have Chuck on it.
Oh, I hadn't thought about that.
I bet he thought he was never going to get that gig.
I would like to see that. Okay, I'd like to see some funny money with King Charles's face on it.
King Charles III.
So used to seeing Queen Elizabeth, when I go to obviously London, obviously that's I'm looking at the money this is strange looking. But anyway, or even in Canada up north, right?
Or the Bahamas. Or Turks and Caicos, or Belize. Right.
So any of
former
those
British
places,
Honduras,
they consider the day after Christmas Boxing Day. That's not its roots. Modern day Boxing Day is a shopping holiday, which is more consumerism, which I'm sure we can figure out somewhere in the
Well, why was it called? Why box? Why the
80s.
word box?
So
What's
the
it from?
Boxing Day was like it's alms. It's like it has to do with the Anglican Church and the box of alms. So the day after Christmas, essentially the wealthy to-do people, after they celebrate their fabulous Christmas day and their children open these fabulous new gifts or whatever, on the next day, the churches would put out boxes on the front steps, and people would come and bring donations to give to the poor kids and poor families. So that's the idea, was you donate to the poor. So probably, I don't know, you probably get all kinds of good stuff on Christmas Day, and then you go through the shit that you don't want to keep, right? Because you got all kinds of new stuff on Christmas. So you go and give that away on Boxing Day in those boxes at the church. And that's, you give away, it's a box of alms, and the church then obviously distributes to the less fortunate people. So that's the supposed origin story.
There's also a secondary origin story, right? Which is that
like the supposed origin.
Like wealthy people, English wealthy people, like Lord of the Manor, whatever, they would give a box of gifts, presumably like maybe leftover gifts that they got and were regifting, but to their household servants or to less fortunate people, because it was such a class-based, a highly stratified class society. So it was kind of like, this is the time for rich Brits to give back.
Right. So it says here, according to the BBC, the term Boxing Day was popularized during the reign of Queen Victoria, 1837 to 1901, when the still unofficial holiday was practiced by rich families boxing up gifts the day after Christmas and handing them out to the poor. It was also common at the time for wealthy families to give their servants a box of gifts and have them take the day off so they could share the gratuities with their families. Boxing Day was made an official bank holiday in both England and Wales in 1871. It wasn't until 1974 that Scotland followed suit, probably begrudgingly. 1974, right? While literal Christmas boxes given out by rich employers aren't common anymore, lots of people practice the spirit of the holiday by giving back money, gifts, or their time in support of those less fortunate each Boxing Day. However, if you spend your Boxing Day eating leftovers and watching movies on the sofa and shopping, that's probably the more realistic current present day celebration of Boxing Day. So I personally love the theory of the concept of the supposed, whatever the origin story is, whether it's, these dukes and duchesses giving shit to their servants and then the servants get the day off. That's still great. That is still wonderful. If it has something to do with the Anglican Church, people in the community bringing stuff to the church and leaving stuff in boxes and then the church distributes to the poor, still a great, wonderful thing. I wish more people still did stuff like that. And I wish we could popularize the term Boxing Day here in the US.
Well, we kind of have something that's analogous that the Brits don't have, right? I mean, it's kind of not completely dissimilar to Thanksgiving. I mean, like on Thanksgiving Day, often churches have like a big giveaway of donations. There's often a food kitchen kind of situation where people come and work in the kitchen and give the homeless people a turkey or whatever.
Yeah.
So it's not an exact analogy, but it's somewhat. There's some overlap, right?
That's true. There is some overlap from American Thanksgiving. So that's kind of nice. And of course, the origin story that we have for Thanksgiving is a load of shit, but it's nice for 6-year-olds like my son, right, to hear these stories of like, this is why we have Thanksgiving. I'll explain later. 10 more years. Give me 10 more years. I'll explain to him.
We'll talk about the genocide of the Native Americans later.
We'll talk about that later. We'll talk about blankets with like measles and smallpox. We'll talk about all that stuff later. At 6, that's fine. The Indians and the Pilgrims was friends on that day. So I like that origin story. It's cute. But I would love for us to have an actual Boxing Day, because then if you think about all the Western countries, and mostly Christian countries, right, that for the most part would celebrate Boxing Day, I think it would be a really nice thing if people actually thought of, hey, on Christmas Day I opened up and got 50 new whatever bullshit that I don't need, right? So why don't you offload 10, 20 other things that you already have that you no longer use because you just got 50 new things? So offload them to the church. I wish we would celebrate that here. That's all. I think that's a really nice thing.
Okay.
So,
all right.
Instead of having it be commercialized because people all over London today are shopping.
Well, everything gets commercialized in a capitalist system. That's the nature of the system, which is why part of the reason I hate it. Anyway, although I like my consumerism as much as anyone else.
I like some of it too. And by the way, can I just note, so I'm not fully well yet. Like, you can probably hear in my voice, I'm still like a little stuffy. I'm going to cough along the way, but I put on a little bit of makeup today to try to give myself some color so I don't look like I'm half dead, because I'm trying to psych my brain out with the look good, feel good theory. And I have to admit, I think it's kind of working. Like, I know I can't push myself, having like pneumonia and it takes weeks and weeks to recover from this, but I feel like looking at myself looking healthy, I already feel like I wrote out my day planner today of like odds and ends that I need to do, and I'm feeling more ambitious after I put on my face. So like the whole look good, feel good, I think there's something to it. That's all I'm saying. Like, I thought I'd try it, and really I think it's helping, because seeing myself on camera not looking like death, I think I'm psyching myself out, and that's good, because I have a lot of shit I need to do.
All right then. All right. Are we ready for headlines?
Let's get to headlines. Let's
do it.
Let me hit the jaws.
It's a lot of headlines. Okay, go.
A lot of headlines.
President Biden has denounced Russia's large-scale Christmas Day attacks against Ukraine that damaged critical energy infrastructure, and vowed to continue a U.S. surge in weapons deliveries to Kyiv. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky called the attacks inhumane, while Russia's defense ministry said the long-range precision weapons and drone strikes on critical energy infrastructure facilities in Ukraine achieved the goal of Russian leader Vladimir Putin's forces. At least one person in the eastern, let's try to get through this, Dnipropetrovsk, oh boy, region died, and 6 others in Kharkiv were injured during the attacks, according to local officials. The purpose of this outrageous attack was to cut off the Ukrainian people's access to heat and electricity during winter, and to jeopardize the safety of its grid, Biden said in a statement. Well, as we now know from the Wall Street Journal, it's highly unlikely that Biden actually said that or anything else, but whatever. Trump's pick for a special envoy to Ukraine and Russia also criticized the assault. Christmas should be a time of peace. Yet Ukraine was brutally attacked on Christmas Day, retired Lieutenant General Keith Kellogg said on X, launching large-scale missile and drone attacks on the day of the Lord's birth. He's wrong. The world is closely watching actions on both sides. The U.S. is more resolved than ever to bring peace to the region. I have a question. No, I don't live very far from the Delaware River in New Jersey, where famously or infamously, depending on your point of view, American revolutionary forces crossed the Delaware in the middle of the night and snuck into the British camp, which had also a lot of Hessian mercenaries, and slit their throats while they were sleeping. It was Christmas night, and the Hessians and everyone got drunk, figuring no one ever fights on Christmas. We have the day off. And then George Washington, scallywag that he was, it's like, that's what you think, fuckers. We're coming and we're killing you all. That's considered like, you kids learn about that in American history. Like, look at George Washington. Look, you go, George. You kicked those Brits' ass. And like,
that's some ninja shit.
Yeah, so I guess it all depends on who you're talking about.
Yeah, well, yeah, of course, obviously, because if we're talking about mainstream media here, they're gonna position it as such, because I mean, everything Russia does is evil. Ted. Obviously, don't you know that? But I'd also like to
by
point
definition,
out
just being Russian. Just being Russian makes you evil. Yeah.
You are evil because you are Russian. I would also like to point out, though, that the vast majority of Russians, Ukrainians, Eastern Europeans, the vast majority of them are Orthodox.
Oh,
they're Orthodox Christians.
By the way, on YouTube, Tony J has just typed in that in Ukraine, Christmas is actually January 7th.
That's what I'm saying. They're Orthodox Christians.
So
they don't celebrate December 25th. So that's what I was trying to get at, was Christmas Day, December 25th, does not matter to most Russians or Ukrainians because they are Orthodox. It is not Christmas for them yet.
Hilarious.
So it, like, well, whatever. Like, it's to them, it's just another day. They're gonna wish us, like Westerners, Merry Christmas, to be polite, right? But not. They don't celebrate it.
So if you're Eastern
religion
Orthodox,
is canceled in Ukraine.
So if you're Eastern Orthodox, and it's like, so you hear like Jesus was born on December 25th, it's like they say no, Jesus is still like in the womb, and it's gonna take another 2 weeks,
more weeks
for him to swim out of Mary and get out into the world, right? Not to mention, wasn't he really like actually born in the summer? I think is what historians say.
I think, well, yes, because that would make sense about, the baby animals that were at the nativity scene, because baby animals are not born in December or January.
Good point. Right. So, unless they're on the Eastern Orthodox calendar and the animals they're all confused.
I don't know. I don't know at what point we changed to make this Gregorian calendar what it is. So maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah. No, well, I think they assign, I'm pretty sure they assigned, the Christian church assigned the idea of Christ's birth to midwinter in order to piggyback off the old Roman holiday of the winter solstice. And that was an old pagan holiday, and they were trying to substitute that and like try to like have everything be legacy in order to get more recruits for this new religion. That's why there's the Christmas tree, which is a pagan ritual.
This is very mathy, Ted. You got to count the days, the solstices. I don't do the maths. It's not my thing. I just know that based on nature, baby animals don't tend to be born.
No.
In the winter.
No.
Not to say it doesn't happen.
Except in the southern hemisphere. So if we can say that, like,
fair. Okay, fair.
Right. If we want to say
it's not
that
winter for them, though. But then it's not winter for them.
Right. That's correct. That's right. So, but it would be. But if it was December, then theoretically it's possible.
Right. But, so is Jesus like is the baby Jesus? Is he a global Southian?
Right. Good question. And if so, like, is he an Aussie? Like, good day, mate. Worship my father. I kick your ass. Have some Fosters, bitches.
I don't know what's happening here, but that's making me laugh, and it's making me want to cough.
All right. Just for that, all right, we should move on to the next
Aussie topic. Jesus.
All right, next headline here. All right. President Joe Biden signed 50 bills into law on Tuesday. Again, I'm going to say, I doubt that, he actually signed them, as we now know from the article in the Wall Street Journal that appeared last Friday, but someone did.
He has crayons. He signs things.
Maybe it's an auto signer. Anyway, that included the very important piece of legislation now making the bald eagle the official Boyd of the United States of America, and one that stops members of Congress from collecting their pensions if they're convicted of crimes. Sorry to a certain former congressman from Queens and Western Long Island. Biden also established the first federal anti-hazing standard to address violence and deaths occurring on higher education campuses around the country. He also signed a bill supported by Paris Hilton, which holds treatment centers and care facilities serving the youth accountable. Earlier this month, Biden vetoed bills, to add 66 new judges to understaffed federal courts nationally. I guess he doesn't want Trump to appoint those new judges, right? He commuted the sentences for 37 out of 40 federal inmates on death row, converting them to life in prison without parole, and issued his full and unconditional pardon for Hunter. The flurry of activity comes as Biden is pushing his final priorities before handing over power to Trump on January 20th. He's also wrapping up his time in office by trying to get more money previously approved by Congress out the door for infrastructure problems here in the U.S. and more weapons for Ukraine, because that's been paying off so well. So I got to say, I'm very, very relieved that the bald eagle is now the official bird of the United States. I don't care, actually. But yeah, I don't know what this means.
Are they still endangered species?
I think they were taken off the endangered species list.
Oh,
Where I used to live in eastern Long Island, there was Gardner's Island, which was a very strange place. It was the Gardner family had their own private island, almost like something out of a Bronte novel, right off the coast of the Hamptons. And it was one house, and then this like windswept island, and a family of bald eagles lived there. And every day they would fly across into the Hamptons to hunt. And sometimes you would see them like at your house. We see
them at my house.
One time, a bald eagle?
Yeah.
Well, they're big, and I'm drawing, looking out the window, and suddenly you see this big bird like drop in front of my window, fly off into the woods in search of something. I don't know. They're pretty impressive. So
yeah, they're massive birds.
They were in danger because of DDT, if memory serves, until it was banned in the 1970s.
The 70s and 80s.
Yes.
Oh, good times. No, the bald eagle. So the first time I saw them here when I moved to DC 10 years ago, I moved to this side of the Potomac in Northern Virginia 7 years ago. And when we bought this house and I'd never seen a bald eagle in the wild, right? It never even dawned on me that these birds live out here, right? So when I first saw one like flying overhead, like one spring or summer, I think that first or second year that we're here in this house, it was like, I got to admit, because I'm a dumb an Angelino, right? Like I'm from Los Angeles. We don't have
Angelina.
And no, we say Angelino.
Or if you're you're an Angelinus.
No, we take the masculine when it's everybody. So really? It's Angelino.
Seems sexist.
Everybody is Angelino. So I don't see birds and animals like this. So the first time I saw one, I have to admit, I felt that little twinge of patriotism. Like
really?
it was like, wow. I mean, first of all, because like you said, the bird is freaking huge. They have like more than a 5-foot wingspan.
Yeah, they're not even the biggest eagles, but they are big.
No.
And people who say, oh, they can't tell the difference between a hawk or a falcon and an eagle, there's a big difference.
They're big. And so I did a little learning about them. So they look like hawks when they're young. It isn't until they're roughly 5 years old that they get the full white head. Mm. So that's when they're fully mature. They
can live a pretty long time, right? I mean,
they live like 15, 20 years. Like they can live a long time.
Oh, I thought it was longer than that.
Perhaps even longer. In the wild, things happen. But easily they live 20 years. But they're about 5 years old when they get the white head. And so these are like, when I saw that circling, you cannot miss it. These things hunt by where I live here in Northern Virginia in Fairfax County. I live near Old Town Alexandria, and these things, it's beautiful. So I kind of think it's cool that Biden or somebody rubber stamped that the bald eagle became our official bird. And I don't know what kind of protections that offers them.
I don't think it provides them with any. I don't think it provides them with any protections. I think it's sort of like how states have an official bird. Like Ohio's official bird is the cardinal. It's just an honorific. I don't think they get anything out of it. I don't think.
Oh, that's too bad.
I think if you shoot an eagle or something, you should.
Oh,
probably be executed. But yeah.
Well, that's too bad. And then this thing with the Paris Hilton thing, I think it's great. I haven't looked at it's great that somebody signed this into law. But I think the most shocking thing about this whole Paris Hilton, first of all, when people heard her speaking on the Hill,
she was fantastic.
She doesn't actually talk like this. Her real voice is actually kind of more low register like this, which I think shocked most people. And the fact that she, she was actually doing something good. Like,
Well, also, she's she's intelligent. She's passionate. She turned, it's kind of like she turned out to be awesome. Who knew?
Yeah, who knew? So that's, a couple of good things came out of there. So I'm not going to knock Biden on everything that he signed into law over like Christmas Eve, but these are a couple of good things. But then the bullshit outweighs all of this, Ted. The fact that he's going to spend $1 gajillion.
Why do they wait? I mean, like, really, truly, what's with all the last second shit? I mean, what was so controversial about the Eagle? What's so controversial about, like, institutional child abuse? I mean, who's in favor of it? Like, oh, I love me some institutional child abuse. Like, I'm all about that. I'll vote only for someone who's in favor of institutional child abuse. I mean, nobody's in favor of that. I mean, why didn't Biden do this like years ago?
Just kidding.
Years ago.
Yes. I don't know. So I don't know. And why they did it on Christmas Eve? Why would you wait to do all of this on Christmas Eve?
It's very strange. Well, it's obviously a bunch of stuff that they wanted to bury and not make. They didn't want to make a splash out of any of it. Well, I suspect that the vulture lobby is very upset about this bald eagle shit. There was a move afoot for quite some time to either have the turkey be the national bird of the United States, or the vulture. And
the vulture is more
very appropriate.
Very appropriate. I think the vulture fits us, but the bald eagle's a pretty.
Plus, vultures are kind of awesome. If well, they provide a very important service. I mean,
well, okay, fair enough. Yes,
they're like the garbage. They're like the garbage collectors of the wild.
That is true. That is true. I just find I need to look further into like this weird timing of all of these 50 bills that he signed into law. Like, why do you want to bury this on Christmas Eve? Because there's always a reason that timing, there's always a reason.
Timing is the one thing that Washington considers very carefully, always.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely.
All right. We're way behind here. All right, we got to keep moving.
Let's go.
All right. 8 passengers were killed after Azerbaijan Airlines Flight 8432 crashed as it attempted to make an emergency landing near the city of Aktau, that's in Kazakhstan. Azerbaijani government sources confirmed that a Russian surface-to-air missile caused the Azerbaijan Airlines flight to crash in Aktau. According to the sources, the missile was fired at Flight 8432 during drone air activity above Grozny. Grozny is the capital of Chechnya, and the shrapnel hit the passengers and cabin crew as it exploded next to the aircraft mid-flight. Government sources have told Euronews that the damaged aircraft was not allowed to land at any Russian airport despite the pilot's requests for an emergency landing. Instead, it was ordered to fly all the way across the Caspian Sea toward Aktau in Kazakhstan. According to data, the GPS navigation systems were jammed throughout the flight path above the sea. And just to put this into perspective, for people who might not be familiar with the Caspian Sea, it is very big. It's like the size of one of the Great Lakes, or even maybe 2 of them together. It takes like 12 hours to take a ferry from one side of the other, the narrow way. Okay, so it's a big ass body of water. According to, I have flown that route, so I'm very familiar with it. According to data, so the missile was fired from a Pantsir S air defense system. That, according to an international outlet, A New Z in Baku, that's the capital of Azerbaijan. According to Russian sources, at the time of the Azerbaijan Airlines flight, was passing over Chechnya, which is, of course, famously a very restive place where there was
totally chill.
An anti-Russian insurgency. Some historians say that the Chechens are literally the most ferocious and indomitable warriors on earth.
I was just going to make the opposite argument. They're totally chill people, like totally just don't like confrontation.
Chechens,
totally
yeah, not so much.
The Chechens are great. They're just chill.
They're great. They're not chill though. Anyway, the head of the Security Council of the Chechen Republic being part of the Russian Federation, Kazmat Kadyrov, confirmed that a drone attack against Grozny took place yesterday morning, noting that there were no casualties or damage. If the preliminary data is confirmed, this will be the second time that Russian forces have destroyed a commercial aircraft after the MH17 crash in Ukraine. This time, Russia's own citizens, as well as those from neighboring countries, are among the casualties. The crash also evokes an earlier incident from November of 2018 when Air Astana, which is a Kazakh carrier, Embraer 190, lost its hydraulics over Portugal, but with the help of the Portuguese Air Force, landed safely. Further investigation is expected to unveil the exact circumstances surrounding the firing of the missile, the non-authorization for landing at an airport nearby in Russia, and the instruction to cross the sea with a damaged plane. So there's a lot to try to figure out here. But what it looks like is it looks like the Russians were trying to repel a Ukrainian drone attack in Chechnya, in Grozny, and then some kind of either automated or hand operated or manually operated missile defense system was then fired at the drones, and then things went awry and it shot down this Azerbaijani jet, and then at that point the Russians may have been thought we don't know why, but they denied permission to the Azerbaijanis, who are not enemies of Russia by any means. Right. Azerbaijan is President Akiyev there has always had good relations with Russia, but maybe for whatever reason they denied landing. The crippled craft had to make it all the way across to Kazakhstan. They crash landed in a field. A lot of people survived, actually. There's footage. That part's the craziest. Footage of people surviving. I mean, the flight it cratered and broke apart, turned upside. What was left of it turned upside down. I mean, the video is absolutely chilling. There's video of the crash, and so it's hard to say. I mean, on the other hand, if there's a plus to any of this, is that the wounded flight was able to shed some fuel while it was flying across the Caspian. But so it could have been worse if it had tanked into the Caspian Sea. No one would have survived. I mean, this is a real inland. It's like an inland ocean with big ass waves. This is not a placid little lake. This is kind of like their Miracle on the Hudson. Well, yeah, except there was but the thing is, the Russians have something to answer for. Azerbaijani officials are definitely going to say, why didn't you let our plane land in Russia? Right. Why you could have foamed the runway? And Kazakhstan is a modern country in the big cities, but this landed in a field, right? So they couldn't make it to either Astana or Almaty. And, they obviously couldn't return to Baku, which is, a fairly modern airport, which I've flown in and out of. Amazing. So but I mean, it also kind of is interesting because it happened just a day or two after the U.S. shot down its own fighter jet, right? Yeah. So there's, it's like, and don't forget the U.S. also accidentally fired down that Iranian flight in I guess that was in the 1980s or 90s, the flight that was going over the Persian Gulf, and the U.S. thought it was, and there's also some evidence that the U.S. may have shot down TWA Flight 800 in a missile test when that plane crashed off southern Long Island, that it was an accidental missile firing during a Navy exercise. Yeah. So these things can happen. Yeah. So I don't have much to say about this other than I think it was a freaking miracle that everybody didn't perish. That just a few people, I think we need to read more about what happens from investigations, but at the end of the day, it's a Christmas miracle that not everybody died. Yeah, an 11-year-old girl survived, was thrown clear. That's amazing. So, all right, let's move on. Germany is set to face a tough 2025. It has stagnating growth, fiscal uncertainty, geopolitical risks, high energy costs, and a weakening automotive sector. Without reforms to unlock structural investments and bolster competitiveness, Europe's largest economy risks prolonged malaise, one of my favorite words. Germany's economy, once considered the powerhouse of Europe, is navigating an era of stagnation and structural changes. With growth projections among the weakest in the developed world, there's major problems in the year ahead, and here they go. Number one, the German economy has seen no growth over the last 6 years. Growth projections for 2025 are still bleak. GDP is going to expand by just 0.3%, according to Goldman Sachs. The Bundesbank projects an even more tepid 0.2%, while the Kiel Institute says outright stagnation at 0% growth. Here in the U.S., we like to see 2 to 3% growth at least. Underlying this stagnation is a confluence of weak exports, sluggish private consumption, faltering investments, decarbonization, digitalization, and demographic shifts are exerting downward pressure on output. And analysts are questioning whether Germany's malaise is temporary or it's going to go on for a while. Germany's early federal elections, scheduled for February, bring heightened economic and political uncertainty. Investors are watching to see if the new government will stimulate Germany's substantial fiscal capacity to stimulate growth. Despite Germany's fiscal capacity, with one of the lowest debt to GDP ratios among the major economies, the constitutional debt break limits public borrowing, so they can't necessarily go into debt in a Keynesian way to stimulate the economy. Germany's auto sector, a key pillar of the economy. They can't
do what we do, basically.
That's right. They can't do that. Continues to lose global competitiveness. Formerly dominant players like VW, BMW, and Mercedes-Benz have steadily lost market share to the US and China. According to Goldman, China has evolved from Germany's key export market to now a main competitor, particularly in EVs, and German car makers are not doing well there. Germany's export-driven economy is still vulnerable to rising global protectionism, particularly from the US, and obviously the incoming Trump administration is going to probably have a negative impact on that. While the size of US tariffs is highly uncertain, our work suggests that much of the growth drag is likely to come from a higher trade policy uncertainty, Goldman said recently. And finally, high energy prices remain a persistent burden for German businesses.
That, Ted.
Shocking.
I wonder why.
I don't know why. I don't know. The Bundesbank reported that industrial production in energy-intensive sectors has gone down by 10 to 15% due to elevated gas and electricity costs, with little hope for recovery this coming year. Germany's decision to phase out nuclear energy has compounded the challenge, leaving the country reliant on costlier and less predictable energy sources. If only they had a big natural gas pipeline from a reliable, cheap source. I heard they had something like that. Only there was a way. And I think it was doing pretty well, and then something happened. I don't remember, but anyway, a more optimistic scenario would hinge on decisive reforms to reduce corporate tax burdens, expand infrastructure, and address labor shortages through immigration and workforce participation policies. If these things don't happen, structural stagnation will continue well beyond 2025. Germany in the shitter.
Yes. So, Ted, a couple of things there. So, like that last portion where you read about, the whole Germany's labor shortages are being met with immigration, right? In order to fill that gap. This is where that nighttime Christmas market, that got all the people that got run over. 5 people, I think, died. From the driver was a Saudi immigrant from I think he immigrated there in 2006, early 2000s, and he was a shrink. He was a Saudi shrink that immigrated there, right? Because maybe there's a shortage of shrinks, because it's not like Freud or anything was born there.
Well, that was Austria, but anyway, yeah. Right.
Well, same.
That's
whatever.
True. It is
potato.
It is.
So
true.
It's not like the Germans and the Austrians didn't invent this whole psychology thing. They brought in a Saudi shrink that's been living there for the past 20 years, who ran into this crowd of people at the nighttime Christmas market.
Do we know if it was intentional? I mean, sometimes these things.
Oh yeah, it was.
They're not always intentional.
No, it was. But he was psycho,
Right.
But anyway, my point is, it's bringing up the whole conversation in Germany about immigration. Imagine that. So they have to. They're now, the Germans are now talking about immigration out there. They are now talking about maybe the pipeline having, the Nord Streams 1 and 2. I wonder if that, we'd be better off if we didn't listen to the Americans.
I don't know if the Americans really checked with them before I'm sure they didn't. I'm sure they just did it.
Check with them.
I bet the Americans were like, sucks to be you. We're blowing it up.
And now you're stuck buying American LNG at 3 times the price.
Right.
Or greater. And so now the Germans are stuck because Olaf Scholz has no balls. And as you can see, he's like a feckless leader. And that's why his red light, green light, whatever traffic light coalition has gone to shit. and he's got that vote of no confidence, and they're going to go to the
But
snap
Manila,
election.
if history shows us anything, it's that if Germans are suffering from a poor economy and weak leadership and nativism, that they're not going to ever get so mad as to really do anything crazy.
That's true. That's true.
Because Germany has never really represented any kind of threat to Europe.
They won't just swing the other way entirely at all. It's, the AfD party, all that, totally fine. Like,
they've always been a chill people, like the Chechens.
Yeah, very chill, not non-doers. They're just kind of like, let me take a siesta.
Yeah, and when they get mad, they're not particularly organized people.
Totally not the Germans. They're known for their siestas. Ted, I think siesta originated in German.
That's
Siestag,
right. Das Siestag.
Yeah. All right,
last one.
Let's go to that next one.
All right, I like this one.
This is for you, Ted. I put this one in there for you.
I knew you did. January 1st marks the dawn of a new era for Popeye and Tintin. I know you're all wondering what the fuck I'm talking about. It's the day
I don't actually know Tintin.
Oh, you don't know who Tintin?
So the dog? Isn't it a dog?
Yeah. Tintin's he's a French dog. He's a scruffy French dog. Anyway, and he goes on somewhat. Well, Tintin went on adventures with his friends and owners, and basically he's kind of like a colonialist, like racist dog who basically, they was drawn by like kind of a right wing, like, it's very much of its time. It's like 100 years old, 80 years old, and basically the cartoonist would draw like black people with like jigaboo lips and like that kind of thing. Yeah, like it's pretty. There's some really offensive, highly dated shit in here. There's Orientalism like crazy.
Wow.
Yeah.
Look that up.
It's very much of its time.
Sure.
20 years ago, there was a big reckoning in cartooning where a lot of people were like, Tintin sucks. Kids shouldn't read it. But anyway, but there's a lot of people who fought back against that. Anyway, January 1st is when the nonagenarian cartoon characters officially enter public domain, along with a treasure trove of other iconic works. Copyrights of thousands of films, songs, and books expire in 2025, making them available for people to use, share, and adapt however they fucking feel like it. The list includes classics like Virginia Woolf's book, A Room of One's Own, the Fats Waller song, Ain't Misbehavin', and the Marx Brothers' first feature film, The Cocoa Nuts. The main thing they have in common is their age. Under U.S. copyright, their terms all expire after 95 years. All of the works entering public domain next year are from 1929, except for the sound recordings, because that's a different law. Those are from 1924. Once they're in the public domain, the works become available for remakes, spin-offs, and other adaptations, which explains the recent wave of horror films starring Mickey Mouse and Winnie the Pooh.
Yes.
Which
it's Steamboat Willie. It's not Mickey Mouse.
Me up to no end.
Technically, it's Steamboat Willie.
True. Disney argued that the Steamboat Willie version of Mickey Mouse was different than the version that we're all familiar with, and tried to buy a few extra years. The courts disagreed with that. Anyway, these characters entered the public domain in 2024 and 2023. The trend continues. There are already 3 Popeye slasher movies in the works. Man, like I am what I am.
I would like to see the backstory. The backstory of Popeye. I can get with it.
Popeye's obviously gone psycho from too much spinach. Tintin, the brave cub reporter, and his dog. Oh, that's right. I always thought Tintin was the dog.
I thought it was. No,
it's his dog is Snowy. I guess I forgot about that. My mom didn't let me read Tintin. She thought it was a bunch of reactionary shit. Anyway, will enter the public domain well before they will in the EU. In the EU, the copyrights last until 2054. And the EU copyright terms are 70 years past the death of your creator. And Hergé, who was the Belgian cartoonist who created them, died in 83. Closer to home, there's E.C. Segar's Popeye, who made his debut in a January 1929 Thimble Theater cartoon strip. Because who doesn't remember Thimble Theater? He sports his signature pipe, sailor outfit, anchor tattoo, and sense of humor. Responding when he's asked if he's a sailor, "Do you think I'm a cowboy?" He could have a whole new set of adventures starting in 2025, but there's a catch. He didn't start deriving his strength from spinach, until 1932. So, you know, I don't understand why they're all horror movies. Why aren't there like, you know, I mean, I remember living near,
story?
I used to live right next to Times Square and all the X-rated theaters, and there were always all these parodies of mainstream films like The Bonfire of the Panties and stuff like and I'm like, why are there not like more porn movies? That's just my personal bias, you know, in terms of, but I like, you know, slasher movies are funny too. I don't know. It just seems like there's a lot of room for parody. I think personally, I do think Popeye. I loved Popeye. I think I'm a student of Popeye, too. And I have to say, Popeye. And for me, for the animated shorts, it all goes to shit once the Bluto period begins. After the Brutus period, you know. You know, fuck Bluto. It's got to be Brutus. I don't really remember the details of why. But I like the Sea Hag. I'm on Team Sea Hag.
Yeah.
But I think Sea Hag probably wasn't introduced until much later, so she's probably still copyrighted.
Wow.
So it has to do with when you were rolled out. So
I guess so. So it's not the whole Popeye universe necessarily.
Right.
It's Popeye.
No. Popeye himself. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, definitely I don't know. I mean, personally, I never understood like a great desire to use other people's characters. Like, I know I have a lot of colleagues, cartoonists who,
because it's
they draw legacy strips. You know, like they're hired.
Popeye's already famous.
Like King Features is a syndicate, is an old syndicate that runs. They distribute a lot of old strips that are now drawn by people who are like third or fourth artists to ever draw it, like Dick Tracy and stuff like that. And they're still around. They're still in newspapers. And I'm always like, you know, like there's some guy, I think it's a guy, drawing Nancy. You know, Ernie Bushmiller designed, you know, came up with Nancy, but now there's been a bunch of sequels. Nancy is owned by the syndicate. And I'm like, but, you know, why would you want as an artist to express yourself through this old character that you didn't come up with? I mean, I know people do and they're into it. Because
it's capitalism.
But it's art. It's art. I mean, you know, it's like
for you as an artist, but then there are people like me that are not artists that'd be like, I can think up a great script for the Popeye backstory about how he became who he is and whatever. I think of that stuff all the time. I'm not the original artist, but all the stuff, like I question all the stuff I grew up watching, and like in my mind, I rewrite stories because that's, you know, I'm like,
you know what? One big opportunity, it seems to me, honestly, it's not just these slasher films. It's commercials, right? I mean, you could totally have Popeye spinach commercials and stuff, right? I mean,
Popeye's already famous. Why reinvent the wheel? People already love Popeye.
You can steal him now.
And now it's not stealing. Right.
It's not stealing. That's my whole point.
So there you go. I would love it. I like, maybe, you know, as a hobby, I do write little short stories just as a hobby that no one's ever read or seen anywhere. But I rewrite, like I said, things that I grew up watching where it's like, I'd like to know the backstory of, let's say,
fan fiction.
Yeah. So, you know, just to keep my writing chops up. And I would like to see maybe, you know, other.
Well, first of all, all right, well, let's have that exercise, and then we'll get into our Festivus topic here.
I think.
All right, so Popeye, what do you think the deal is with the spinach? How did that happen? Like was he bitten? Was he bitten by a radioactive spinach?
No, I think that was probably commercialized by Big Spinach.
Oh, okay. Yeah, Big Spinach is a thing.
That part I don't know. I only remember Popeye with the spinach. So
and his relationship with olive oil. I mean, is she his beard, or are they seriously like tapping it?
No. Olive oil. I never liked the character herself, because she was always like, I never liked the girl. Well,
she's weak.
The damsel in distress, right? Yes. I never liked the damsel in distress character ever in any. Yeah. That's why my parents didn't let me watch. My dad didn't let me watch Disney movies because it was always the damsel was always in distress, right?
Yeah, he was right.
80s, so
he was right.
And lo and behold, this is who I grew up to be. So when I saw olive oil, I did admire.
How about the sea
I
hag?
admire how thin she was, though.
So you got some body dysmorphia
I
issues
absolutely.
through
And then
olive oil. Well,
and
she's
I thought
painfully
men.
thin. She's anorexic.
I know, but I also grew up in the 80s and 90s where Kate Moss was
Mm.
the model.
But olive oil is also part of the joke is that she's really mousy.
Right. Which is not me, but looking at Kate
But
Moss
olive
in
oil,
the
but we're
90s
supposed to
and
think that
olive oil
Popeye,
in the 80s.
yeah, she's always getting kidnapped by Brutus.
Right. Right.
And then what's Brutus's deal? Like, why is he such an asshole?
Brutus is kind of beefy as a woman. I would have to say, I don't know. I like a big beefy man. You've met my husband. He's a big beefy guy.
Unshaven. He's always unshaven.
Right.
Like, that was a trope of the 1920s and 30s. I looked into this. That you always see characters who are unshaven. And now that doesn't really mean much because that's like George Clooney, right? But
yeah.
at the time, that was a sign of that was a classist thing. It was meant to indicate because poor guys would have like old razor blades and they could never get like a really clean shave. So it was an indication that you're looking at a lower class character.
Interesting. So not even beards?
Actual... No. A beard at that time was like a sign of a person was a ruffian, like a brigand, like a hillbilly or a criminal. Yeah.
So like a Santa beard was not acceptable in that time?
No, that would have just been like, well, if you're Santa and you're a kindly old man, sure, that's
because
okay.
Look, Miracle on 34th Street was a 1930s film.
Yeah. Well, it's Santa.
And he's Santa.
Yeah. And by the way, Santa, of course, as we know him, was designed by Thomas Nast, the 19th century editorial cartoonist for Harper's Magazine.
No kidding. I didn't know that.
He did not, until that period, Americans didn't think of Santa Claus as being fat or wearing a red and white suit or anything like that. No, he's based on an 11th century bishop in what is today Turkey, in Anatolia, and he became a Christian saint,
right?
Because he was known for giving gifts to particularly poor children, but also just children. He was a very generous and apparently long-lived guy, and apparently a very wise and beloved bishop, which is how he got beatified and all that.
Oh, well,
so that's the origin. So Saint Nicholas is that guy, right? Oh. He's actually he would have been like a skinny, short, swarthy Turk, is what he would have been.
That's pretty funny. All right. Do you want to leave headlines there and get into our?
Let's do it.
All right. Let's do the Jaws and
bum,
let's go.
Bum, 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 bum. It's the most special time of the year, Festivus, when Americans gather by an unadorned pole to vent their grievances. Grievance number 1, we're 3 days late to this particular Festivus Special, which is supposed to happen on December 23rd. We're two people who are paid to kvetch and complain, share our personal and political whines, grouse and rant to a world that's too busy whining about their own silly worries to pay attention to our very, very, very important complaints. We are pissed, and you're going to hear all about it. And if you don't know about Festivus comes out of a Seinfeld episode that was written by a guy whose father actually came up with the idea of Festivus, and he was inspired by his father's plea for a holiday for the rest of us.
Mr. Costanza.
Right, but the writer of the show, actually his real life father came up with it. Yeah.
His real life father did? I did not know that.
And the whole, feats of strength, unadorned pole, all that stuff.
No kidding.
But it never got off the ground until his son wrote the episode called The Strike for Seinfeld. So Festivus is best known for the airing of Grievances, where we talk about all the shit that's been pissing us off. And Ron Paul, I know who you... Oh, sorry, is it Rand Paul does this now? Rand Paul, who I know you're a fan of, not as much as Ron, comes up with his Festivus release of government waste every year, of really silly and dumb government wasteful spending. So Festivus has a storied tradition now in this country for being not just the center of culture, but also politics.
Well, I like that everybody puts their own spin on Festivus. So, like, we obviously would need hours upon hours to air out all of our grievances about politics, geopolitics, social issues. So I'm trying to whittle mine down to like the main thing that this year annoyed me.
Okay.
And for me, because it was an election year and I did vote Donald Trump, and I'm saying it publicly, and I have said it publicly.
You have said it publicly.
My grievance is that everybody to the left of anybody that voted for Donald Trump, like me, we're atypical Trump voters.
Yeah.
Stop calling us Trumpers. I mean, there is a difference. There are people that are full on MAGA that believe like Trump walks on fucking water and that he's just like everything he does is correct and wonderful. And that is just not true for the millions upon millions of voters like me who felt that we had no other choice because of not only the entire election system, the electoral process that we have, how candidates get on ballots. I mean, do like for someone like me, like more of my own personal beliefs and you know who espouses them best, probably more of a Jill Stein or ideally maybe a Ron Paul, but he's like literally almost 100, so that's never going to happen. But those people, like Jill Stein was on most ballots, but there was no chance in freaking hell that she was gonna win. There just wasn't. You can finger point to, you know, mainstream media not giving her enough credit or time and, you know, like helping spread the message. But that's for a reason. Also, you can talk about how the money fine, whatever. But it is what it is. The system that we have, I'm not saying doesn't need to be changed. It does. But it is what it is. And November this year, we lived in it as it existed. So you have to accept that's fucking reality. This is America 2024. This is what we have. Jill Stein was never going to win. Chase Oliver was never going to fucking win. His own party didn't even like him. He was never going to fucking win. There was nobody on there that was going to win. It was either down to Harris or Trump. And then even more microcosm, where I live in Northern Virginia, Trump was never going to win. He was never going to win my district. He was never going to win my city. He was never going to win my county. It was never going to happen. So for me, it was largely a protest vote in saying, fuck you, fuck the system, fuck Kamala Harris, fuck Joe Biden, fuck this whole empire. And Donald Trump represents, he is the big orange middle finger to say fuck you to everybody, especially if you live in my county, Fairfax County, right? And lo and behold, there were a lot of people, and I would venture to say a lot of middle-aged suburban moms just like me that came out in droves to vote for him this time, whereas in 2020, they voted for Joe Biden. Donald Trump's numbers ticked up in Fairfax County, and I believe it's from women like me that were just completely fed up with the bullshit. And I would say a lot of the NIMBYs showed up because, you know, there are too many immigrants coming in and they're not having it, these soccer moms, because, you know, Fairfax County is among, if not the richest, among the richest counties in all of America. And there are, you know, we've shipped in a whole lot of like Afghan refugees, Iraqi refugees, and all of this stuff in the Biden years. And I think a lot of these moms are over it. And Trump spoke to that. So Trump being the big orange middle finger, there are people like me that voted for that reason, not because we adore Donald Trump, not because we don't think he's, you know, foul-mouthed and whatever. But I also, like me as Manila, I recognize the man as a human. There are some good things that he's going to do. There are some shitty things that he does. There are some idiotic, moronic things that he says, especially like when it comes to like anti-BDS stuff or whatever. but we don't think he walks on water. There are millions and millions of people just like me in America that held our noses and we checked the box for Donald Trump, and it doesn't mean we are Trumpers. So stop freaking calling us that. If you have beef with us voting for the orange guy, then get out there and go petition like your local whatever. I don't even know who you would like write to complain about how we have this electoral process that is so fucked up that people like me had to choose Donald Trump. Don't take it up with us. Donald Trump just represented the big orange middle finger, right? Just like Luigi Mangione, as dark as what he did was, he represents something, right? The anger, the rage of the people. It doesn't mean you're a fan of murder, right? Or that you should be, but he represents the anger of people towards that industry. Donald Trump represents the same thing. And is he going to do fucked up shit when he's in office? Absolutely. Is he going to do a couple of good things? Probably, absolutely, because nobody is absolutely bad. So that's my grievance, is stop calling me a freaking Trumper, because we had to choose somebody, and it was either Kamala Harris was going to win or Donald Trump was going to win. Deal with it. That is reality. That's what we live in 2024. If you don't like that we were boiled down to those choices, go out there and make changes about how people get on the ballot, and fair time and fair whatever in the mainstream media. But for now, 2024, it is what it is. And that's why Donald Trump won, because of middle-aged moms like me across America. Deal with it.
I didn't want to get in the way of that. That was a beautiful rant, Manila. Thank you very much. Bravo. Look, I'm not going to argue at all with you about like most of what you said, a lot of which I agree with. I'm not going to, question your vote for Trump. We could do that at some point. But I do want to kind of push back on the idea of like being your fundamental thesis, right? Which is like, when you vote for someone, it's reasonable for people to say, well, you support that person, right? I mean, if you vote for Harris and someone says you're a Harris supporter, I mean, that's true, right? I mean, if you voted for her. By
definition, sure. Yeah. But because Donald Trump is, well, I guess he's proven now that he's not an aberration because he's won a second time. He's just a strange. He still is an aberration in many ways, because we're never going to see another Trump. It's just not going to happen, right? He kind of bucks the narrative, bucks the trends. There are those blips, like if you look at like our economy through, let's go back to the Great Depression to now, right? Like you can see trends, like you can see the lines, the dots, and you can, but when it comes to Donald Trump, for whatever reason, that just doesn't work. That's just all out the window. So, and in this case, if you go in the technical sense, sure, I agree with you.
If someone says you're a Trumpy because or a Trumper or a Trumpist or
whatever they
Trumpalope or anything, Trumpaliquity, I mean, that's I feel like it's completely fair, right? I mean, it's like if someone said you're a Jill Stein supporter. Well, I voted for her. I mean, by definition, that's true.
I voted for her in the past too.
So, I mean, my point is, do I agree with it?
Why would I not be defined by the other people that I voted for in the past either, like per election?
It's shorthand, right? I mean, it's like if you say Ted Rall is a New Yorker. Well, I mean, that's true. Although I wasn't raised here. I didn't grow up here. But it was, it's like, it's not, I mean, sure, I was born in Massachusetts, spent all of my childhood in Ohio, but I've also lived in LA. I mean, I'm just saying, like, it's, Palo Alto, Sacramento, Berkeley. So, I mean, you could say all those things too. I mean, it's not unfair to say, hey, Ted Rall's a New Yorker. Or if you said Ted Rall's an Ohioan, that would not be unfair either.
I agree for the most part. However, when it comes
there's more to me than just an Ohioan, right? Or just
this election. I think this election cycle kind of broke and bucked all the trends, like all the the people that do this for a living that are like, that are these consultants for elections, they're not going to know what to fucking do.
Well,
with
speaking of which, I've got to put, first of all, I'm putting it out there. This is just a marker. We've got to talk about Greenland at some point, not today, but we've got to talk about Greenland. And then also,
we can do that tomorrow.
I got this amazing, yesterday, the New York Times just sort of like farted out this statistic that absolutely fucking blew me away. So 19 million people who voted for Biden in 2020 did not vote in this election.
Yes.
19 million.
Joe Rogan has talked about
that is a lot. That number
which is
keeps
why
going up. We thought it was 8, then it was 10, then it's 12. Now it's 19.
Why Joe Rogan has talked about this actually, which is why the people that I would define as Trumpers, the people that believe he walks on water and can do no wrong, that to me is how you define a Trumper. Those are the people that have been saying for the past 5 years that Joe Biden stole the election, that this is why, because there were trends like, and they're just kind of, ghost stories from different areas. But now the numbers
There's no evidence, though. There's really no evidence. But
now the numbers are out, and you're saying, where are these 20 million people that 20 million like that?
Well, I mean, I guess you can retro engineer it and say, reverse engineer it and say, oh, well, those people didn't really vote for Biden in 2020. But that's not what I was trying to get at. What I was trying to get at
I'm just saying, I'm not a Trump.
So what happened to those people? I'm working on this new book. It's coming out soon called What's Left. And so, but this got me thinking, what sociologists and political scientists in the US and pollsters never look at is the theory of the non-voter. Like, who are non-voters? Why don't they vote? It's assumed generally that people who don't vote are apathetic, lazy bastards, and that's why they don't vote, right? But clearly those 19 million people, they know how to vote. They're registered to vote. They did vote, so they can vote. And it's actually easier to vote now than it was 4 years ago because there's more write-in ballots.
Why did they sit it out?
Yeah, why'd they fucking sit it out, right? And I'm sure not all 19 million people have the same explanation for why they sat it out. But still, that is a massive thing. I mean, that is a lot of fucking people, right? So
that is a huge,
that changes 3 times the population of New York City. That's a lot of people.
That changes whole outcomes. So.
Yeah, massively across, and it would have had massive down ballot repercussions. I mean, the point is that we don't go. There's no one who ever polls people who didn't vote and say, why don't you vote? What would have made you vote? Would a different candidate have made you vote? If there had been a different issue on the ballot, if the candidate had campaigned differently, would you have voted? There's literally no study of this at all. And my theory is like Democrats. So Democrats had this theory since the 90s that basically you can grow the party by poaching liberal or moderate Republicans. That was the Clinton DLC DNC model, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, but I've always had this theory that there's more growth to be had in a country where only 55% of the public votes in a national election. In the non-voters, the 45%, don't worry about like the 2 or 3% you might get.
Don't poach. Yeah.
And Donald Trump proved that. He got millions of people in 2016 to vote for him who had never even been registered to vote before. He created a new party by bringing in outsiders into the party to vote for him. Well, so, it's not like Republicans really en masse changed their minds. Old Republicans who voted for Mitt Romney voted for Donald Trump. Some did, but that's not why he got elected.
That's not who won.
And so the point is,
that's not who won him the election.
And similarly, if you're the Democratic Party, you've got to be thinking about. So if I did a whole search on like writing about analysis of non-voters, no one fucking does it. There's like no studies. Really? Like no one is like. There's no polling. It's the same way that there's no polling. We don't know how many socialists there are in the country because no one ever says, are you a socialist? Or are you a communist? Are you a left libertarian? Are you are you an anarchist? Are you a right libertarian? No one ever, do you support? Nobody asks that. Literally all polls ask, are you very liberal, somewhat liberal, moderate, somewhat conservative, or very conservative? That's it. That's the only thing they ever ask. And so we don't know anything. And it's just, I don't know.
My
I guess you
answer
could
would
say
be
that's my rant.
it's complicated.
It is right, which is why we need a lot of detailed analysis. I mean, I
Wait,
think if
that's
you,
your rant? That's what
no,
you're
no,
angry about?
no, not at all. No, it's just
No,
I
you
just
have
thought
to
it was
give us your
interesting.
rant. You got to
Okay.
tell us your rant
Okay.
before we're out of
Here's
time.
my political rant is as follows. Fuck all the people who told us that we should disbelieve our lying eyes, and that Joe Biden was completely sane and smart. The elevator went all the way to the top floor, that he was never senile, that all the talk of dementia meant that you were like a right-wing Trumpist, that you were an asshole, that you were an ageist, and you hated old people, that if you saw that, there was something wrong with you. All the crap where we were told, like, oh, who are you, Ted Rall? Are you a scientist? Are you a physician? Have you personally examined it? Are you a gerontologist, Mr. Ted Rall, cartoonist, talky guy? And it was like, so, back in 2020, my mom died of dementia from Alzheimer's. So I had some, she'd been fading for the better part of 4 years, but really, I can tell now, probably more like 10. And like the point is, Scott Stantis, friend of the show, who I do the DMZ show with, also, he went through this with his own father. And so when Biden was running in 2020, I remember talking to Scott, and we said this in public, like, this is dementia. Well, and it's not the most far gone case of dementia ever, but this is dementia. It doesn't get better. It only gets worse. And a person with even a smidge of dementia should not be president of the United States of America. And so we were told, like, this is like, no, you don't know what you're fucking talking about. Even as recently as the last election, just a few months ago, Kamala Harris said, that's ridiculous. She said, we have a hard time keeping up with him. Literally. Like, really? Really? And so then, it's like this thing I always like to quote from my lawyer, like, not only was that not true, it could not have been true. And so, like, now we know that, for example, so the Wall Street Journal does a deep dive, and we're not talking about the editorial page, which is right wing. We're talking about the liberal-dominated news section of the Wall Street Journal, which does exquisite, solid reporting, far better than the New York Times. They go deep into the administration. They get lots of people on the record who've been in the White House, who know Joe Biden, saw him every single day, or maybe they didn't see him every single day because he was kept hidden a lot. Right. But they have stories. And this goes back to, from the very beginning, he was addled and diminished and never qualified to be president. And there are some shocking fucking stories. Like, do you know that Joe Biden only met with his cabinet 7 times in his entire presidency?
In 4 years?
7 times in 4 fucking years. 7 times. And then also, you'll remember when Lloyd Austin, the defense secretary, went AWOL because he freaked out about getting prostate cancer. And he looked a little confused. Like, why is everybody surprised that I'm not around? Well, we now know why. Because it's not Austin's fault. Austin was confused because he has not met with President Biden in over 2 years at all. Not once. They haven't talked
we're not
on
at
the phone.
War or anything.
They haven't tweeted at each other. They haven't.
We're not at a proxy war or anything.
Share each
Why
other's
would we need to meet with him,
Instagrams.
Ted?
Yeah, it's not like the Defense Department's up to anything in Israel or Ukraine or any place else. I mean, it's like, so literally he's like, what do you mean? This is like a work from home job. I don't have to. It's like, probably, again, Pete Buttigieg, Department of Transportation Secretary. I was thinking, like, that's weird. He took 6 months off at the very beginning of his term to go be a dad. Like, that's strange. And it's like, well, now we know why. It's like, being a member of the Biden cabinet meant that you didn't actually have to show up to work. It was a work at home gig.
Wasn't there?
Yeah. So like we now know that, like, Jill and her little team of insular. Oh, and we know that Karine Jean-Pierre, poor Karine Jean-Pierre, who, is not the most likable person, but she is, the press secretary is supposed to actually meet with the president quite often, like one-on-one. She never did. Never. She was like basically just told, go out there and fucking sell the shit. And she did. And she's like, I mean, can you imagine how incredibly awkward and uncomfortable that is. I mean, I remember working at the bank in the 80s. My boss would be like, call up the client and fuck him over. I'd be like, why don't you call the client up and fuck him over? I don't want it. It was your decision. It's like, and so that's what she had to do. It's just like, it's a shit show. Now the truth is just starting to come out. So it pisses me off. All of the media knows, right? Chris Cillizza came out and from CNN and said, well, I should have asked harder questions. No, you should have reported on what you fucking knew. And if you didn't fucking know, you're too stupid to be a reporter. And so, because anyone, I'm just as all the people who gave me shit and Scott shit and people like us shit have been, going on, and now they're all like quiet. I mean, this is okay. I don't think Joe Biden did steal the election. I don't think it was through stop the steal type crap. This is theft. The Democrats ran a demented dude for president of the United States. They lied to the American people and pretended like he was fine. They used the cover of the COVID lockdown to keep him in his basement. It was a coup d'etat. This is not like Ronald Reagan, who lost it the last 2 years of his presidency. Or Woodrow Wilson, who had basically Mrs. Wilson running the presidency after his stroke, or even Eisenhower when he was diminished. This is like from the very beginning. The guy, it's not like, we started out okay and now we can't finish the job like Pope Benedict. This is from the very beginning, from the outset. You fuckers ran someone who couldn't do the job. You told the American people he was doing the job. We don't even know who was actually responsible for anything that quote unquote Joe Biden ever did, signed, or anything. And then the assholes were going to run him. They wanted to run him for re-election again. And they thought we were so fucking stupid that we weren't even going to notice when they paraded him up onto the debate stage. And even then, they didn't admit it right away. They dragged the shit on forever because they were trying to keep him.
He had a cold, Ted.
It's a cold. And then, Kamala Harris has reason to be pissed. I'm pissed at Kamala Harris too. She had a patriotic duty. They all had a duty to
what, 25th Amendment him?
They should have 25th amended, and yes. Well, from the very beginning, though, he never should have run. And don't forget, this is the guy that they pulled out of their ass during the middle of the primary season in 2020 in order to get to stab Bernie Sanders in the back. Right?
Sure.
So literally it was like, we would rather not have Bernie Sanders, who, whatever his imperfections, is one of the more principled, thoughtful, progressive, intelligent members of the U.S. political scene. Fuck him. Let's not have Medicare for all or, a higher minimum wage. Let's not do any of that. Let's get this old piece of shit who should be in his grave or in a memory care unit, and we'll make him the fucking president, and we'll just pull the strings behind the scene. They're all scum. They should all be, honestly, they're all guilty of treason. They should all be shot. No, really. They stole an entire country. Really.
That's fair. Okay.
So that's my rant. So, and now here's the thing. The people who went along with that, they all make big bucks. They're all still at the op-ed pages of the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal and the, and
all those consultants, millions of dollars.
Making bank. Meanwhile, Ted Rall is here underemployed and unemployed. And it's like, it's fucked up. And so are you. This is fucked up. People who are right should be rewarded. People who are wrong should be punished. That's my rant.
I couldn't agree more with that. But again, does this boil back down to this being because we're in a capitalist society that let's be real, the hundreds of people that surround Joe Biden daily, right? There's a whole apparatus.
Well, not anymore. Apparently not really. No, apparently there's only like 4,
Well, now, but leading up to Joe Biden. By the way, they were shooting at
everyone out of the room every time he would walk from one part of the White House to the other, or I should say shuffle. from or limp or lope or whatever he was doing,
Yeah.
wander, they would clear out all of the White House staff,
so people wouldn't witness it.
Yeah, mm-hmm, yeah.
I'm sure. Well, I mean, but
POTUS is on the move, like.
Right,
Scooch.
whatever his code name is, they're like Secret Service is clearing everyone out.
Dancing reindeer.
I don't know what I think they've released what his code name is. I don't know it though. I need to.
Fucktard is on the move.
What is Joe Biden's Secret Service code name?
Yeah. Dancing turd. And his Biden, wife also is definitely part of this. So is Hunter.
Oh, his wife is total. The Biden family is part of this, 100%. There's no way that they're not. I don't know. I can't pull up real.
And quickly. then to have the balls to sort of say, "Oh, we're Celtic, defending democracy." You're what is it? Celtic,
Celtic. Yeah. Americans probably say Celtic
because he's Irish. Yeah.
Right, Celtic and Capri. Jill is Capri.
Capri.
And I don't know what Trump's name was Mogul, and Melania is Muse.
Huh. I wonder who chooses the names.
Well, I think they're
almost poetic.
I think POTUS and their families kind of give ideas of what they like, and then Secret Service decides. So that way they have a book of names that they've used, and they're like, okay, you can. How about this and this? And then the families.
What would you choose for yours?
Hell if I know. Jeez, that's a tough one.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. These are so good. Celtic and Capri and
I think I'd want
Mogul.
Feline. Feline is on the move.
Feline. Fierce.
Ooh, fierce is good. Or I'll take fucktard since it's still available.
It's probably definitely available. They gave Donald Trump Jr. Mountaineer.
That's strange. And long, too.
But yeah, so if Celtic is on the move, you clear everybody out of the West Wing or whatever, the East Wing, that's the family residency or whatever. Mm-hmm. But so my point is, leading up to 2020, there were hundreds of people in the apparatus that surrounded Joe Biden, right? Like all of these advisors, all of these paid consultants about image and literally everything. They're consultants for everything. What shoes you should wear, what your hair should look like, literally everything. So there are hundreds of people surrounding this man that knew.
Yeah.
Because like you, Ted, I took care of my grandmother literally until the day she died. The moment she died, I was holding her hand. She took her last breath. I watched her for years descend into dementia and Parkinson's disease. And I saw it back then that Joe Biden of 2012 was no more by 2016. Yeah. He was no more.
Yeah. Well, I think my theory is that he was still sharp by 2014, 2015. But
something happened by 17, 18
after you know what it was.
After his son died.
That's exactly it. When Bo died, he snapped and spiraled out. And to the extent that you can feel sorry for someone who supports genocide and is hopelessly corrupt, I do feel sorry for him. That's a horrible thing. But then he had no fucking business running for president of the United States. I agree.
So the main question here should be, Ted, if we have not, in effect, had a mentally present POTUS for 4 years, then doesn't that expose our system of presidents that this is like no more as useful as having the Queen of England?
Yeah, no, I mean, yeah, you can totally. I had that whole theory about Donald Trump and his first term and how, he's basically a madman. And it was like, well, obviously the founding fathers have constructed an amazing system where you can have a lunatic as president of the United States. And it really doesn't matter. Cities didn't burn, wars. We don't have civil war. The economy didn't tank. Everything was all right. So, obviously the American system sort of runs itself. It's on autopilot, and hopefully we won't end up like that Azerbaijani airplane in a field. But like,
Well,
I
but
kind
is
of
it
think that's
supposed to
right.
be that way? Is it supposed to be that way?
Well,
I would say
it shouldn't
no.
be. I would say no, because we were told that this is a truth in advertising thing. We were told that we elect someone who represents, who runs on a set of campaign promises that then he or she tries to enact when they're elected to represent our interests, and also as new issues come up to try to think about what our best
Right.
interests are and enact those. Well, that's not what we have. I mean, what we have is a cabal of former Obama era hacks who basically,
Yes.
behind the scenes, nobody's elected. And even if they're very well intentioned and very smart, I don't doubt that Tony Blinken is smart. Not well
I
intentioned, but
do.
smart. He's smart enough. I mean, he's not a fucking moron. But like, the thing is, we didn't vote for Tony Blinken. Okay. So
Correct.
therefore,
So when did the change happen, Ted? Like, at what point did a president stop being the actual leader? That there's no leader in the Oval Office. When did that happen? Was it like Teddy Roosevelt era, Taft era?
No, I think Richard Nixon was clearly the leader in the White House, and there's a lot of evidence in the White House tapes to support that.
Like post Reagan.
I think maybe post Reagan, yeah, when the full-fledged corporate capture of the U.S. government finally totally, they always had influence, but once that happened, yeah, it's hard to. I mean, you can't really point like this is the day.
Right, there's no exact date, but I mean, I was a teenager in the Clinton era, but I think it's very safe to say if you had to pin it on one POTUS, you can say Clinton.
With I would say that's
NAFTA,
right.
And if you had to pin it on one guy, pin it on Clinton.
Yeah, and Bernie Sanders had this analysis. He doesn't get any credit for it, but it's correct, where he said that when the Democratic Party decided to go away from its small donor model to go, it used to be until 1980s that really only Republicans got major corporate contributions. Democrats were reliant on labor and individual contributions. And then Clinton's team was like, we can get the big bucks, but we have to, suck corporate dick in order to get it. And so they're like, yeah, we can suck corporate dick. And
totally
so
fine.
Gobble
Glory
that shit, gobble that sweet nectar up. So they did. And so that was the Clintons' genius. But of course, there's a price to pay, and those donors expect their calls to be returned, and they expect their interests to be represented. Not surprisingly so.
There are people. I mean, when I was posted to Capitol Hill, and I'll make this my last word, and we could say goodbye. But when I used to have official press creds, right, to Capitol Hill, and you spend all fucking day there. Right? Like, you start talking, you just talk to people. Sometimes you're at the commissary, you just talk to people, right? Sometimes, like, and especially old people like Joe Biden, like, you see old people there that are not famous, that you don't know or whatever, but they are movers and shakers, right? In Washington, they are unelected Washington. And I can't tell you how many random old people I talk to in the commissary or just in hallways, just in passing, that kind of pinpointed Bill Clinton, or the Clintons, I should say, as having, and I'm paraphrasing, and I'm kind of globbing everybody together, all these old people, as I review in my head, like comments that they've made, all these old school Washington types. What they all seem to concur on was that DC changed when Bill Clinton came to office, and there was suddenly big corporate interests, and they're like lobbying, like K Street blew up, they said, in the 90s, like, just it became a thing. So that's basically the consensus of all these random old people, that if you put a camera on them, nobody would recognize who they are. But these are movers and shakers. Like, these are think tank people that are in the ear of the presidents, in the ear of senators. These are people that actually make moves happen in Washington. And I couldn't tell you how many times these really old people that are probably, many of them are probably dead at this point, told me about the 90s, gave me stories about the glory days of the early 90s. And they effectively said Bill Clinton was the one, the Clintons came to Washington and changed it for the worse.
I believe that.
So makes a lot of sense to me, I guess. So Anyway, we should wrap. We'll call that our Festivus show. So I think a lot of us, obviously, this is mostly a political show. So obviously, Ted and I have a lot of political grievances to air. I think a lot of people that watch this show have a lot of political grievances to air. We would need literally hours upon hours to talk about all the various grievances. If we want to talk about like social issues, oh my God, there's so many issues. But Ted and I are working towards kind of reshaping the show going into the new year, now that we kind of have a hang of everything. We recently had a team powwow about it. And I think I could say that again without, because, the Washington Commanders might go back to the Redskins. So I can say powwow without sounding racist. Just saying, because Trump is coming back. We can say Merry Christmas. We can say all those things again. We can be politically incorrect, because I've never claimed to be correct. But anyway, thank you guys for watching. Make sure you guys please subscribe if you are on YouTube. It is free. It doesn't hurt you, even though I hate them. I love our show. So I will ask you to please subscribe on YouTube, but please make the conversion. Go to Rumble. Subscribe to the TMI show there.
Do both.
On Rumble. Or both. The TMI show, one
There's
word.
There's good content on each that sometimes doesn't exist on the other. So for that reason alone, it's good to be on both.
Yeah, I have. No, they kicked me off of YouTube entirely. They completely nuked my account. I'm not allowed to have a YouTube account.
Have you appealed?
So I had to make a new. I'm about to look into that. I've been too ill, as you know,
yes,
to actually fight back. But I'm, now that I've got,
you gotta fight for your right to
YouTube.
Yeah.
No, I've got makeup on, Ted. This is my war paint.
Yep.
War paint.
Maybe
so please, guys,
maybe I should try it.
Try some makeup. Make you feel good.
I've had makeup before when I was on national TV.
When you're on TV, you got to.
Yeah.
If you guys are on Rumble, please and thank you. If you can become a paid subscriber, $5 a month, we can keep doing this show for you. It helps pay the bills, make some ends meet, pay for our internet and equipment and stuff like that. And hopefully eventually one day this can be an actual real paying job. If you're enjoying what you're seeing, you find value in what we do, please and thank you. Please become a paid subscriber. At the very least, share us. Did you know Rumble has a new share button, Ted? It makes it so much easier to repost. Okay. Yeah, if you're on the .com, on the desktop version, there's a button that says repost. So you can actually just share. It's easier to just share the content, and that will help us grow as well. If you're not in a position to monetarily chip in for me and Ted to help us that way, then you can help us just on social media by sharing our work, because we are fully independent and we do rely on your help as a subscriber or otherwise, so we can keep doing this. So make sure you guys at least click the thumbs up, smash that like button, as Jamarl Thomas would say, and that'll do it. Smash it. Don't break your keyboard. I always tell Jamarl, don't smash it, because then you break your keyboard. That's not good. So that's gonna do it for us. Thank you guys for tuning in. We've got lots of grievances, not enough time, but we'll be back mañana for more news and probably still more grievances, Ted. I think we do Festivus year round.
Yeah. Festivus is in our hearts. Festivus, we have the Festivus spirit all year long. All year long,
Ted and I.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Very Festivus in here.
Festivisium. Right. Bye, everyone. Bye, Manila.
Adios, amigos. Thank
Robbie,
you.
get better.
Feel better, Robbie. Adios.